Our guest this episode, Elmer Eubanks, Fitchburg resident and candidate for state representative, and Fitchburg Ward 6 City Councilor Beth Walsh. Thank you both for joining us today. Issue 1, a petition before the Fitchburg City Council submitted by our guest, Councilor Walsh, would establish a code of conduct for elected officials regarding the use of social media. The proposal would not only put in place guidelines on conduct of the elected official, but also puts responsibility on the official to monitor and react to posts and comments by residents on social media pages that they administer, as well as enact guidelines to ensure that open meeting laws are not violated. Councilor Walsh, why did you submit this proposal?
As a new city councilor, I was concerned with my ability to know about public records law and open meeting law, and to follow those directives so that I didn't violate those in any way. I thought it would be helpful for not only the new city councilors, but all city councilors to know what those laws are, how those laws affect our behavior, and how to avoid violating them. What the petition proposes is to provide guidelines to city councilors in the use of electronic communication. And that includes social media, but it's all electronic communication. The guidelines, they're not rules, they're not statutes, they're not regulations, they're guidelines. So there are no punitive measures attached to these guidelines. It's a suggestion for a level of behavior or a level of conduct that city councilors would be asked to follow.
Elmer Eubanks, is this a good idea?
So I'm concerned a little bit about it because there are a couple of steps that I think might be concerning, and one is how are we getting into kind of regulating the council and what they can do and what they can't say. So we might go into a little bit of a rabbit hole. I like the part that says, it's suggested, so it's not something that's going to be put in like, okay, we're going to do it this way. And I think on their personal email from the council, I think that's a good thing. But I think, we go down a little bit of a rabbit hole if we start going through, or, how are we going to monitor it? So a few concerns with that. How are we going to monitor that? I know it says, the councilor's got to monitor it, but that means that now they have to be monitoring, you know how fast that media goes, right? You go into Facebook and it goes like 30 million people making comments, and how are you going to monitor that? So there's some concerns there. And I think Natick also had an issue where the school board was they put a policy that was similar, and it was kind of like, okay, the judge said it was unconstitutional, so we might go down that path. So I think that might be some of the issues that I would see.
Cindy?
I think it's a good idea for if they're city pages, if it's, the councilor's page themselves, then maybe it's not a bad idea. But to put it on social media pages that they may be admin to, I don't agree with at all. Being an admin on a page is enough challenge as it is at times. You can't be monitoring everything that everybody says. I don't think that's right.
Michael?
I would concur with Cindy a little bit in that you can't babysit thousands and thousands of people. What I'm curious about, has the city solicitor weighed in on this at all?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I consulted with the city solicitor and the assistant city solicitor. That's a mouthful. First, before I actually proposed the petition.
Yeah.
And the guidelines themselves were drawn up by the city solicitor.
Okay, all right. And maybe that was one of the reasons why there are more guidelines versus actual rules.
And that was always the intent from the beginning, is that this is a level of behavior that we want people to aspire to, and not necessarily force people to agree to.
Yeah, because I do question whether it's enforceable in terms of, I don't mean whether it can be enforced, I just mean in practice, whether that's something that can be maintained. It's just that social media is like, you push on one end, it comes out the other end, and it's like you're forever chasing, one of the culprit, so to speak. So
right.
That's what I would question in terms of enforceability. Guidelines are fine. It's just I would hate to see the exchange of ideas and free expression gets stifled as a matter of practice just because people are trying to follow the guidelines. That would be my one hesitation.
I think part of this was to stimulate freedom of expression. I think sometimes on social media there's a tendency for people, because it's anonymous, or because you're not facing the person to whom you're directing your comment, I think there's a level of freedom that some people don't have in a face-to-face discussion. And I think sometimes the comments get a little vitriolic or offensive. And I think if there's a level of behavior, and again, this is only for city councilors who are monitoring their own social media sites, so Facebook or whatever. And so if you have someone on your Facebook page who is posting things that are offensive, I think in that way it actually discourages free discussion, because sometimes people are afraid to say what they mean because of the pushback that they get on
When I'm
social
looking
media.
over the proposal, the guidelines that was submitted, and I think it's a good idea to have a policy in place. Most private businesses do now. And it's a good idea, I think, for local governments to also. I mean, we've seen the state crack down on open meeting laws as it pertains to social media and emails, and actually issue fines to local officials, even though there was no intent on their part, but
Right.
it was just a lack of understanding of the law, so this helps give some structure to that. One of the things that jumped out at me that just raises a red flag with me is some of the guidelines, such as positive branding, is that we're looking for to Fitchburg to be painted in a positive light. Is that the stifling of a free exchange of ideas? I mean, of course we want to paint Fitchburg in a positive light, but there are some things, you look at the condition of the streets, you look at other things. I mean, Thomas Kincaid couldn't paint that in a positive light. But if we stifle that, how do we improve on things? Is that a concern?
Exactly. Yeah, because people are going to vent either way. I would rather people vent their concerns so you're aware of them, and I think people should look at that as an opportunity to address the concerns. If you have a group of people that are all of a sudden, there's a post about potholes that day, well, clearly that's a concern for Fitchburg residents, and they're venting. They're thinking, where else do I go? I've already complained about the potholes. Nobody's listening. And so, that's a good place to set up a dialogue. I don't think... there's several pages locally, discussing Fitchburg Now is one of them. And I think for the most part, there's a lot of positive things on that page. You're always going to have certain people that are going to, say what they want to say, but what are you going to do? You can't monitor everything.
Well, again, though, remember the guidelines themselves are for city councilors to follow, not the general public. We're not saying that no one can post anything negative on a Facebook page. What we're asking the city councilors, and I think that this benefits the city in a way that if I'm the owner of a business and I hire you as my vice president, I certainly don't want you to go out and post on social media that my business is terrible and I never meet deadlines and all of that.
I can see that. I see
So
what you're saying there.
as a city employee, as all city councilors are, we're trying to let people know that the city of Fitchburg is open for business. And if city councilors are making negative comments on social media and complaining about things that are going on in the city, then that paints a negative picture. And if I'm an investor and I say, well, gee, that's a city councilor, that's someone who's in charge of the city, and they're talking about how negative things are, then I don't want to invest there. I'm going to go put my money somewhere else.
Where do you draw the line? What about city councilors making negative comments about other city councilors?
Again,
All fellow employees of the city.
well,
I haven't seen any city councilors talking bad about Fitchburg, to be honest.
I don't know that I haven't heard city councilors making comments in city council meetings about other councilors.
I think, though, it does say, though, in terms of not only what city councilors post on social media, but anyone who's part of their page posts on their page, says the city councilor shall monitor and moderate the comments and posts on their site. Any comment or post in violation of the above requirements are subject to being removed, archived, or otherwise hidden from public views. And it puts that responsibility on the city councilor because it says silence or failure on the part of the city councilor to object to the statements made by others, even liking a post, could be taken as tacit admission.
And I think that's the challenge that I see, that it's really starting to kind of free the speech of the counselor too. And I think you want to be able to feel free to comment on what's going on and what's happening. And I think it's going to be a challenge to, like, you know, you've gone on social media and it goes fast. Sometimes you can't even see that somebody liked it. You know, now the new Facebook stuff, it's like by the time you see a post, it's buried someplace and you don't even realize it. So it's going to be hard to monitor.
And then to have to go through a post and every time somebody says something negative about Fitchburg, you've got to delete it.
Yeah.
No, that's not allowed here. Delete it. No one's going to go on your page anymore.
the issue, right?
That's not what the guidelines are proposing. The guidelines are proposing if someone posts something that's obviously offensive, that is racially offensive, or comments on if it subjects the city of Fitchburg to liability, then that is where the city councilor would have to step in and say, okay, I am monitoring this Facebook page. This is something that subjects the city to liability. Therefore, I have a responsibility to remove that post.
Yeah, I think that gets into, like, really, you know, free speech. We're trying to kind of hush you down, I think.
Well,
It's
free
tough because
speech is
we're
not,
trying to-
free
yeah, we're
speech
trying to
doesn't
weigh
mean
the-
that you can say anything you want,
Well,
anytime
I know
you want,
you can't
anywhere
call
you
fire,
want.
right? You can't do
Right,
that. But
it's regulated in time, place, and manner, and that's, and basically what this is asking the city councilor to do, it's not regulating it, it's asking them to follow these guidelines.
And I think we do have to find that balance between protecting free speech, but also protecting the city from liability, particularly when it comes from open meeting laws. We saw, a federal court rule against Trump and his Twitter because he was blocking people, so they weren't allowed to redress their government on a site that he was using as his official site. So, could the same thing happen in Fitchburg? Could a resident or a voter sue the city because the city councilor blocked them on Facebook?
I think that could potentially happen. And we could also see more than that because it could be violating some of our First Amendment rights too. So that's the challenge, I think, trying to keep
So there's
that.
a lot of
There's
moving parts in
moving-
here, and my personal feeling is it demonstrates the need to come up with a policy like this, and I would commend Councilor Walsh for at least getting this conversation started. Personally, I have some issues with trying to put rules around what can be said, or whether it's a positive light or what's a negative light, or whether it has to stick to a certain topic of the thread. I think that's getting into gray areas, but I think areas in terms of making sure that we're not violating open meeting laws and we're providing that open forum for everybody, I think is a commendable goal.
Definitely.
And also their city councilor page. I can definitely understand
Right,
that.
if
Like
it's-
you want to be careful what you're saying on that page, and you really don't want to be getting into too much discussion there.
like
but other pages,
their email,
Correct.
their email from the
Yeah.
council and their, council page. I think that's
Yeah,
appropriate.
absolutely.
And that's where I
Beyond
think that all city councilors could use some guidance along those lines.
Yeah, I think one of the things I noticed too is that the city solicitor gave an opinion that he believes that all city councilors should be using their official city email address
Correct.
to communicate with residents instead of other forms like Facebook Messenger or their own private emails, so it can be discoverable. I'm not sure about that because if I'm meeting you at a coffee shop, our conversation is not recorded. We can have an honest conversation. We can have an off-the-record conversation. We can have a conversation that we can trust is not going to be public, and I can feel confident in that. With what the city solicitor is saying was an email, all email should be through the city so the city can monitor it, and if there's any request, that can be made public.
Well, if a resident contacts me about me in my position as a city councilor, and I respond in an email, that record is discoverable. If I respond, I have just created a public record, and that is discoverable.
On
And-
your city,
and
on your city
email,
email.
yeah, your city
on
email.
any email.
Well, but not, but what I'm saying is the city does not monitor it. It could be subpoenaed.
Right.
Right.
Right,
But it's not-
and that's part of the problem, is that it's difficult, if the city is then sued, it's then difficult to collect. The city, it's the law presumes that the city has control over those documents, and in a lot of cases, they don't. So they're going to be required to gather those documents with a public record request, and they may not have them. And I think that's
so
the
technology
concern.
is moving very quickly,
Yes.
probably quicker
Yes.
than,
Yeah.
than the laws are.
And-
You can see not everyone's on the same page still.
Right,
Even,
yeah.
with, even with the city
Right.
emails, the city solicitor sent out the directive on the city letterhead with the city seal saying only city email addresses should be published, and then his private email is what's published on the letterhead.
Irony.
You probably all need to get on the same page.
Yeah,
There's a lot
exactly.
of work to do on that.
That is a little ironic.
Issue 2, the state legislature is considering a proposal to raise the cap on the amount of hours a retired state employee may work on the public payroll while collecting their full pension. Currently, retirees are allowed to work up to 18 hours a week. The House version is proposing to raise that cap up to about 30 hours a week. Proponents claim the higher cap would allow municipalities to hire these part-timers rather than hiring full-time employees, which would save money on health insurance and other employment costs. Opponents of this measure contend that it is double dipping and will encourage state employees who would otherwise not retire to instead retire and collect their full pension while continuing to work nearly full-time hours. And that puts additional strain on an already debt-ridden state pension system. Is raising the cap a good idea, Elmer Eubanks?
So my first reaction was no, it's not a good idea. But digging deeper a little bit, I saw that there were, there's some issues that with that cap we might have. So one of them would be that, I don't think you can go up to 30 because that's full time.
Full time.
So there's a couple of issues with that. One is the people that are working, the new kids are coming out, they're graduating, they're going to have a hard time finding a job if there's no opportunities out there, right? So these guys are already retired, so I think, and it's hard sometimes to be retired and not, making a full pension. Some of these guys are making $35,000, $25,000. So those that retired a long time ago might not have that benefit. So I think raising it to a certain level might be okay, but I think 30 might be way too much because that's really full time. I mean, that's what full time has become nowadays. So
Yeah.
And
I
that's
think
what the House is proposing.
that would be the hard time. I think that's
Cindy.
not working.
I agree with him. I don't approve of that. I think 19 hours or 18 hours is more than enough. I think that you want to leave those opportunities for those additional hours for newcomers to come in. And I think if the person wants to continue to work beyond 18 hours, get a job outside the public sector.
Michael?
Well, we're throwing around the number 30, actually, and the proposal is 29.
29,
Oh,
yeah.
cap.
To be exact,
yeah.
right?
And so, but that ties into what I was going to say. It's almost like the author of the proposal is trying to have their cake and eat it too. Let's try to get as close as we can to full time without calling ourselves full time.
Yeah.
And so it just seems really arbitrary. It does smack of double dipping when you push it right up into what's almost full time, and then along with the full timers. So 18 hours may be a little light, but geez, whatever happened to sort of meeting in the middle? I mean, 22, 25 hours.
yeah.
Make it a if this is something that would benefit would help and give some flexibility to municipalities or whatever, make it 22, 25 so that it's still really part-time. Okay, maybe just 18's a little light. Put it somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Councilor Walsh?
I think the Senate version of the bill calls for 23 hours a week, and it's the House version that
29.
is at 29. So I think that, I know that I have friends who are retired teachers, and I had a friend who was working for a private school after she had retired, and in April of that year, she had to stop working because she had worked her full limit. I think it was like 2 weeks before, there had been a superintendent in Boston who was making a six-figure salary when working, retired, and then got called back, and they made a special exception to let this person continue working. And so I think that there's I can see where some people who retire, then they realize that they really don't have enough money to live on, and so limiting them to 18 hours a week or 960 hours over the course of a year, makes it difficult for them to live.
But there's nothing preventing them from getting a job outside the public sector. They could work 40 hours a week if they wanted.
That's true, but if you're, if, you know, this person was a teacher, so she had to look for a private school that was looking for her particular area of specialty, or work out of state.
Does it come down to a gamble of what we're looking at in the future of being more of a cost burden on taxpayers, health insurance or pensions? Right now with pensions, right, the state currently has 60 cents in assets to back up every dollar of liability in the pension system. Last year, the state contributed $2.4 billion. In order to even meet its own projections, by the year 2036, it has to be contributing $11.4 billion. Even with inflation, that's a massive increase.
Yeah.
So if you raise the cap, people are going to retire earlier and then go back and work 30 hours and collect their full pension. It's certainly going to add to that pension deficit. But if they do that, you're also saving, municipalities are saving money on health insurance costs, which continue to skyrocket. So where is that balance?
I think that's what we gotta try to find out what that balance is gonna be.
Yeah. I'd say 20 hours. To me, I would say 20 hours max.
Part-time.
Anything more than that, go look elsewhere.
But where do you find that happy middle ground? Well, you don't jump from 18 to 29. You do maybe what's more the state Senate proposal, which you said was 23.
Right.
So I mean, you know, that seems a little bit more reasonable of a jump here, and we'll see how it plays out.
The other thing that is, I think it's in the current composition of the bill, not the proposed bill, but basically it says that there's also a limit on the amount of money that people can earn, so they can only earn the difference between the current salary of the position they retired from and their pension, and so that calculation differs from person to person. And I'm wondering if, rather than limit it to the number of hours, if you looked at it in terms of the dollar amount compared to what the current position pays and what their retiree amount would be, if that would make sense as well. I don't know if that.
And of course, there's always the scenario too, where we're looking at one or the other. If the city could always save money on health insurance costs by just hiring more part-timers while not having the other person retire and go on collecting a pension early, right?
And that's what colleges have been doing that lately too. You know, they keep hiring more and more part-timers and you know, to save themselves the money. You only give them a couple of hours a week or couple courses.
Issue 3, Roseanne Barr became the latest in a series of celebrities, following others such as Kevin Spacey, Matt Lauer, Charlie Rose, and others to lose their jobs for behavior that occurred in their personal lives off-set. Are networks making the right call by canceling shows and firing celebrities based on the value judgments of the networks? Or should the networks allow shows to stay or go based on the market forces of ratings? Cindy?
Well, I'm kind of mixed on this one. I kind of like the idea of, you know, leaving it up to the market forces. But, you know, these people are representing that network. So it's no different than somebody representing the, you know, I might do something really stupid outside of my job, and that might be a reflection on the agency because I'm an employee of the agency. So, you know, people still have to, there should still be some code of conduct. I mean, you just can't be doing bizarre things like that, and it's, you know, there has to be a consequence. So I guess I'm probably leaning more towards the network having the right to fire them because, you know, they're representing them.
Michael?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Cindy. It's private business, and you may not like the decision, you may not like the conduct, you may choose to either you know not watch the program, or there may be people that, you know, for instance, boycott ABC, their other shows because they liked Roseanne. So it works both ways. So you have to leave it at the First Amendment doesn't extend to private businesses in this fashion, and so you have to give the businesses flexibility to do these sort of things. You know, just like the NFL, I may not agree with what the NFL did in terms of its policy that it put forth. They have the right to do it, sure.
Councilor Walsh?
I think that in a lot of cases, I don't think they got fired for behavior that they committed in their personal lives. This was something that they did while in the workplace. You know, Roseanne Barr's comments were her own private comments, not on her show. But in the case of Charlie Rose and Matt Lauer, this is behavior that occurred in the workplace.
That's true.
And in some cases, it was a power play or whatever. But in some cases, it was actually criminal behavior. And so for that kind of behavior, I think, yeah, those people should be fired. For Roseanne Barr, I was never a big fan of Roseanne. I'll say that right up front. But when ABC hired her back and reinstated that show, they knew what they were getting. And I think that when that is what they were looking for, and then they got it, and now they're saying, oh, we're shocked. And I actually wrote down their comment was, Roseanne's Twitter statement is abhorrent, repugnant, and inconsistent with our values. And I guess it's disingenuous to me because they knew exactly who she was and what she was capable of.
They brought her
before
back for the ratings, and they knew what they were getting.
Right. And
You
then
know,
when
you
she
shouldn't
pushed
be shocked.
when she pushed the limit just a little too far, then they were like, "Oh, we're shocked." But I don't know. I think that they got what they were asking for.
Elmer?
Yeah, I think the same thing. It's like they, as a business, I'm with you in the sense that the business can decide what they want to do with the contracts that they have with people because they're not there to they're there to make money, right? That's their point of view. So if
Right.
they can make money, that's probably their position. They're like, okay, we're going to lose money if we don't fire her. So that was their decision that way. But I think I'm agreeing with you in that sense that they were bringing her on knowing that she was going to be a firestorm in that area, right?
Yeah, I mean, no question, they're a private business, they have the right to do it. They have a right to do what they want with their employees. But from a perspective of you as a viewer, right, we're the consumer, we're their customers. Are they being held hostage too much by political correctness? I mean, would All in the Family be on TV today?
yeah.
Which
Yeah,
was
yeah,
an
which was
iconic
very,
show.
very.
Of course, but it's what Elmer said. It's about making money.
Yeah.
So don't think that, and to Councilor Walsh's point, ABC's not being super virtuous here. They're making a business decision, and they made a determination that what she did that one time, even though they knew it was possible that could happen, they knew that was going to start costing them some money. And you know what? All in the Family was a #1 rated TV show for 7 out of the 9 years of its existence. I'll tell you, if that had dropped to number 48 in the ratings,
They were out.
CBS would have canceled that, saying, "Oh, this is just too much. We can't put up
But I
with
mean, how
this."
far do we go now? Now we hear stories coming out about Desi Arnaz, and he may have been a heavy drinker in an abusive relationship. And all. So now do we pull all I Love Lucy reruns off the
I'm
air?
hit to miss.
No, yeah, that's a little bit different. I mean, this is with Roseanne. I
Going
mean,
too far.
It's unfortunate because the show was really, I thought it was pretty good. I watched it a couple times. And they touched on both sides of the political issues of today, of exactly what's going on today. And it's unfortunate that her mouth destroyed so many careers. Not just her. The show got canceled. There's a lot of people
Everybody else.
behind the scenes that people don't even know about that just, boom, lost their job.
Well, they knew what they were signing up
Well,
for.
that's
too.
true, but
they
I mean,
hitched their wagon to
they
her
probably thought it
star.
might take her a
they
little
knew, too,
longer
right?
than that. I mean,
ABC probably had that press announcement worked out and written before they even.
I mean,
signed her
after the
contract.
national anthem, you should have